Hello, everyone. Uh, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's DoD Environmental Planning and Conservation webinar series presentation. As a reminder, today's presentation will be recorded and then posted on the Natural Resources DEDX website under Resources. Today's presenter is Dr. Susan Bonfield. She is the executive director at the Environment for the for at she is the executive director at the Environment for the Americas. She will be discussing protect insects, protect birds, a call to action for conservation through World Migratory Bird Day. Excuse me. Following the presentation, we will have time for questions. Before we get started, please take a moment to make sure your phones and web browsers are on mute. Before I turn it over to Susan, Rich Fisher would like to say a few words. Rich?
Hey, thanks, Jerry. Yeah, this is Rich Fisher, National Coordinator for DoD Partners in Flight, and I have the honor of introducing our speaker today, Dr. Susan Bonfield. DoD Partners in Flight was fortunate to have Sue visit our annual meeting last year in Colorado to talk to us about World Migratory Bird Day, a program that really has inspired a lot of installations to celebrate this event, which helps to educate our military personnel and their families, not only across the nation, but across the world about migratory birds. So thanks to Susan for that. Sue has over 30 years of experience managing research and educational collaborations across the Western Hemisphere and in Europe, leading multiple organizational research projects and mentoring youth. Her passion is in connecting youth to science, nature, and conservation. In 2007, this desire led to the establishment of Environment for the Americas, of which Sue is the director. The organization was built on the foundation of its keystone education program, World Migratory Bird Day, a global celebration that connects people in partnership with the United Nations through the phenomenon of bird migration. She also has held positions with the U.S. Forest Service, the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Sue holds a master's in natural resources from the University of Michigan and a PhD in human dimensions of natural resources from Colorado State University. Today, Sue will be speaking to us about Environment for the Americas and World Migratory Bird Day in her presentation. So Sue, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rich. I really appreciate it, and it's great to be here with all of you. It's always wonderful to be able to reach out and, thank goodness for Zoom and all of our new technology. So today, like Rich and Jerry said, I want to share a little bit about Environment for the Americas and who we are, what we do, the history of World Migratory Bird Day, and how we've come to focus on insects this year. Share our resources, and then update you on materials and what's available to you. And of course, we want to invite you to join the celebration and to host programs and activities where you are. I always like to start with a thank you to our sponsors, including the Department of Defense and Partners in Flight Legacy Program. It's the support of the agencies and other organizations that make it possible for us to work and to continue to grow World Migratory Bird Day, which it has. Last year, we saw over 700 events just in the Americas, and over 1,000 when we looked at our accomplishments worldwide. So the program has grown significantly from, we used to have, it started out as a very small program, let's just put it that way. But many thanks to you for your support and for making the program happen each year. And I also want to give all the credit to our team at Environment for the Americas. This is just a few of our staff and partners who work with us across the Americas to make World Migratory Bird Day possible. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, but we also have a team that is represented in Mexico, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. And then we work with partners in Canada, and then, of course, around the world to make World Migratory Bird Day and other projects possible. They're able to work on the ground and have, of course, the cultural and language skills to promote World Migratory Bird Day and our other activities. activities in an appropriate way. And it's what's made the program so successful, is having their support. And Environment for the Americas itself, again, it was actually launched with World Migratory Bird Day, which was then called International Migratory Bird Day. And so at the same time that we were taking on the coordination of this program, which is now 31 years old this year, we were also launching our first internship program. So the two went hand in hand. And the reason why they went hand in hand is because we were recognizing that in the United States, the demographics were changing, and we wanted to make sure that Migratory Bird Day was a program that everybody could connect with here in the US. We know from doing the program across Latin America and the Caribbean that it's extremely successful in those parts of the world. But we also wanted to adapt the program to be sure that it worked in parks, national wildlife refuges, DoD military installations, wherever we're going, to engage anybody who's interested and wants to learn about birds and bird conservation. And so with that, we started 4 years of a research program with funding from the National Science Foundation, and we looked at ways to adapt the program to better meet the needs of diverse audiences. And so that's something we continue today through our internship programs. And with that, that's one of our other main goals, is to inspire that next generation of conservationists. So through our first internships, which started with World Migratory Bird Day, we've grown our internship programs to reach over 200 youth each year, connecting to them to programs on public lands, on DoD military installations, and with nonprofit organizations as well, so that they can gain some really good conservation and stewardship skills that will lead them into their careers. And then, of course, as Rich and Jerry mentioned, we do have a research history. We support activities and conduct our own research as well. Our interns have contributed to a considerable amount of work, such as researching shorebirds along the Pacific Flyway. And that has led to much more information that's available about spring phenologies of migrating shorebirds. They were among the few who were doing surveys at that time. And then also to other bird-related projects. And then to this first year, so it's a really great overlap, actually, that our World Migratory Bird Day theme focuses on insects, because we're also focusing on insects with DoD as we join your monarch butterfly conservation efforts. So we have interns on the ground doing that work as well. So again, World Migratory Bird Day has this four-pronged approach, and what our goal is to engage people in conservation, to provide education materials so they understand about birds and bird migration, to make sure that we're reaching diverse audiences across the places where we work. And then ultimately, our goal is to provide protection for birds and their habitats. We also want to influence our decision makers. So we want to make sure that the information that we provide to our partners on the ground, they're able to take it and use it to highlight their work wherever they might be. And using this conservation theme each year has been really valuable. So our organizations that we work with are able to take the theme and then look at it from their point of view, whether it's very local or regional. So for example, you'll see that regionally in the Caribbean, they've always taken the conservation theme and promoted it across the islands. But then it can also be a very local activity like Jackson Park, which dimming the lights for migratory birds is, an ongoing effort of many organizations. So our light pollution theme was very popular that year. And we've also always had support from DoD. So we love the events that take place on military installations and would like to see that, of course, increase. You don't have to be told this, but I'm always fascinated by the amount of habitat that is protected on military installations and DoD lands. An incredible number of birds, and such an opportunity to engage the public in learning about them. So where that's possible, we like to see any engagement activity that we can, and we're happy to work with you on that. So if you're on here and looking or new to the program, I hope you'll reach out after this if you're interested in getting more involved. So 2024, Protect Insects, Protect Birds. This is our conservation theme, and this is a theme that each year we select it with input from the general public, from our sponsors and from our partners around the world. So Environment for the Americas doesn't make all the decisions about World Migratory Bird Day. We want to hear from the public. We also want to make sure that we're getting the key messages out that will help protect migratory birds. World Migratory Bird Day is a keystone program of Partners in Flight as well. So it is the program that supports PIF in terms of reaching out across the Americas, as well as presenting key messages for Partners in Flight. And so who do we work with? Well, we've grown. So in the early days of World Migratory Bird Day, it was actually called International Migratory Bird Day. That was until 2018. And International Migratory Bird Day changed hands over the years. So it was coordinated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, by Cornell Lab of Ornithology, by the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, where it was actually started.
She already made a pitch about.
And it was also,
I
have to have somebody mute. Somebody might want to mute themselves. Thank you. So until 2018, it shifted around and changed hands. And just as a funny story, I got involved with it and loved it. And one day someone called and said, you know, we're just going to cancel this program. It's a lot of work. And I was like, no, you can't. It's too great of a program. So that was when I went to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and started coordinating the program, which just with dedicated attention just took off. So in 2008, again, we launched Migratory Environment for the Americas to take on the organization of Migratory Bird Day. We got interest from other parts of the world. They looked at the program. I got a phone call. They said, hey, we're really interested in this. We want to do this, in other flyways. So we met with the Convention on Migratory Species, which is a United Nations environment program, and talked about how we could merge our efforts. But it was another decade or so before we did that. So it wasn't until 2018 that Environment for the Americas and the Convention on Migratory Species and the African Eurasian Water Bird Agreement actually got together in the Philippines and signed a formal agreement to work together around the world for the protection of migratory birds. And then just recently, last year, we added the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. And so every week we have a meeting of these partners to discuss the development, the coordination, the implementation, and the promotion of World Migratory Bird Day. So it's been a wonderful way to expand the program. And you can see we have a global event map every year where we have people put on their events. And so it's always fun to see how much it's grown around the world. The other effort that we put in place is to make sure that, again, we're reaching as many people as possible. So we translate the materials into so many languages, and it's become even more possible because of our global connections. So our Asian partners, for example, help us with all of these translations of World Migratory Bird Day and the theme slogan into all of the languages. So you can see this is actually a different theme, but I didn't have this year's theme lined up yet in all these languages. So this is what they provide. And of course, we also translate it into the major UN languages. So it's just a very fun part of the program is to see a poster in so many different languages. For us, however, we work mostly in English and Spanish, but we provide materials also in Portuguese and a variety of different French versions because of Canada French being different from Caribbean island French. And these are just a few of the themes that we've had over the years that have, especially in recent years. They've all been popular in different ways. The plastic pollution theme to the far left help to raise awareness of birds and the impacts of plastics on birds, not just sea animals, but also inland birds as well. So you see a kingfisher in there and some other birds that you don't necessarily see by the ocean, a killdeer and a warbler. So this was the first time people started to think about plastics as not just a problem for turtles, but also a problem for birds. And of course, we've talked about the power of partnerships and how important that is to have cross-country partnerships so that we can help to conserve habitats on breeding grounds, migration routes, wintering sites, and so forth. Restore habitat stopover sites, the places where birds rest and refuel, and then, of course, why birds matter and the ecosystem services that they provide to us. During COVID, our Birds Connect Our World theme was really well received because everyone felt like, of course, we were not going anywhere. We couldn't see each other. We weren't birding in the field, visiting other countries. And so truly we were communicating through the birds that we share as they journeyed from north to south in the Americas and across the Caribbean. When is World Migratory Bird Day? I don't know if anybody knows out there, or if there's, I actually didn't check to see if there's a chat box. But if you think about when is World Migratory Bird Day, when the program first started, it was only on the second Saturday in May, which was a good celebration for the United States and Canada, where birds were arriving for nesting sites, spreading out to nest and breed and raise young, but not so great for our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean. So quite a number of years ago, we added a date in October so that we could celebrate with our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean the second Saturday in October. What we've learned, though, over the years is that birds don't migrate on the same day, and where they land and where they are does not always meet with our dates. So we have encouraged everyone to do the program when every day is Bird Day. And we hope that people do it when birds are there, when you have the capacity to host a program. Most of our programs do take place between, I would say, April and May. And then in Latin America and the Caribbean, they're taking place anywhere from October to December. But we have events almost every month of the year in the Americas. It works better. And just as an example, here in Colorado, where the snow might still be in place in the Rocky Mountains, Rocky Mountain National Park finally moved theirs to June when they could actually walk around in the park and take people birding. And so our theme this year, protect insects, protect birds. I love the process of the poster. You might look at the poster and think, oh, great art, but there's actually so much work that goes behind this art. Everything has a meaning, and it's up to the annual artist to actually help us to accomplish that. This year, our artist is Anna Rose. She was selected. She's a student in Ohio. She's a college student, probably our youngest World Migratory Bird Day artist. We've had artists from around, across the Americas and the Caribbean. So from Haiti, Mexico, Peru, Central America, all parts of the Americas. She is from the United States, and we try to rotate that so we make sure we represent all of our partners. We selected her because of her ability to illustrate not only birds, but also insects. And you can see from these first sketches these sketches that she put together, just the incredible amount of detail that she puts into her work, and what a great job she does with both of the types of art. It's kind of rare to find an artist who has the flexibility and the skill that Anna has. She's worked hard with us, and what her job means is that she has to take the species that we've selected and work with us to find what position is going to work that year, how we're going to put them together into one graphic piece. And it's quite a bit of work. And then she has to move to a global poster. So right now we have an Americas poster, and we are also developing a poster that will work for all our partners around the world. So this theme of insects has been one that's been ready to launch for quite a number of years. And so we're excited to have it this year. But just to have people understand how important insects are for all types of birds. A lot of people think of our aerial insectivores like nighthawks as being the insect eaters, but they don't realize that birds like the semi-palmated sandpiper may also depend on insects, especially at certain times of the year. So for many of the shorebirds, insects can be especially important in the spring as they're migrating north, and when they're feeding on the larvae of different insects from the sand and from other habitats where they're foraging. This is, if you do host an event, it's always fun to ask people, We do a lot of surveys at events and try to learn, what kind of information people have about birds. And you might be surprised at how much people can learn at one of your programs. Many don't know how far birds migrate and the great distances they travel and the threats that they face along the way. So these are Anna's final illustrations of the species that were selected. And again, everything on the poster has a meaning. So it's considered by all of our host organizations as the key educational piece for the program. It's one of the most looked forward to components of the program every year. So as we start to develop it, everybody wants to see the final poster. Each of the species this year was selected with care. We select representatives from different family groups. So you'll see that we have a duck, a hummingbird, a shorebird, passerines, a falcon. So we're trying to make sure that we can address the needs of all of our partners who work on different species of birds. And then each of the insects that we selected this year were also insects that are scientifically accurate. We have literature from research projects that show what each of these birds feed on, and we found these different insects as part of the diet. So none of this is just for looks only. Every part of the poster has quite a lot of meaning. There's so much to teach in this, depending on where you are. As an example, the broad-tailed hummingbird feeding on mayflies. Most people don't know that hummingbirds don't feed solely on nectar, and that in fact, about 20% of their diet can be insects. Many people think that they don't have the ability to feed on other organisms, partly because they think of their beak as a straw, right? So we teach people that, oh, that's a straw. So how could they eat an insect? Also, that the chicks of broad-tailed hummingbirds depend on insects. So for hummingbirds, any hummingbird, insects can be critical. Same with the other species, again, with ducks feeding on insects both on the surface of water as well as below the water. Bobolinks tending to feed on the ground, on larvae and adult insects as well. And then, of course, it's always fun to talk about the aerial insectivores, cliff swallows and nighthawks, the ones that are so acrobatic and skilled at capturing insects from the air. And, and then what we always want to do is take this back to conservation and how are birds being impacted and how can people connect. And so where do birds and insects live? This is the other thing we think about when we're putting together Migratory Bird Day is how can we reach so many types of organizations and locations, and military installations themselves are in a variety of locations. So for example, in Colorado, there's an installation in Colorado Springs, whereas some might be more remote or more wild. But how can we make this relevant to broad audiences? Well, insects are everywhere, and we all know that. And so many of these birds are also in many of these locations, from urban areas and forests to shorelines and wetlands, grasslands. And then, one of the things we've tried to encourage people to do is to think of our space, our air, our sky space as a habitat. And that first came about during our Dim the Lights for Birds at Night program, because once the night sky is interrupted by light pollution, birds are impacted in a negative way. And the same with the sky as a habitat in terms of its food source. There are food sources in the air, so birds depend on this space as a habitat. And I love thinking about that as a place that we have to protect for food sources as well as for impacts like light pollution or structures. And then, of course, with the bobolink, the fields and farms. So we really captured so many habitats here. There's just no excuse for not being able to use World Migratory Bird Day wherever you are. And then, of course, there are the tragic messages that we share. And we've learned how to do this in a different way. There was one year that we focused on collisions, and our poster featured birds kind of up against a glass window, and it looked like they were hitting the window. And we had so many comments about the poster, mostly saying that we want the poster to be beautiful, but we don't want it to show we don't want them to show the disaster. So we've been very careful about that since then. But certainly the loss of insects is large, and the extent to which it's affecting bird populations is not clear, but we do know that some of the groups of birds that are completely dependent on insects, like the aerial insectivores, have had some of the biggest declines in their populations of the bird groups. So, it's kind of a practical look at what the cause is, but of course, we're just starting to get more scientific information about the actual connections. But just as this information shares, bird species that depend on insects have declined. There are over 300 species that have declined more than 2.9 billion in the last 50 years. Now that's overall, but there are many, many species of birds. In fact, 96% of the species of birds depend on insects at some point in their life cycle. So it's a large number. And so I wanted to share with you one of the species that we're focusing on this year, which is the American kestrel. We think that this is such a good iconic species for us. Nothing. We want to share that. It's a little bit of a dramatic piece.
The slightest movement betrays the position of its prey, and once located, this small bird of prey is almost infallible. This pair of kestrels patrols the open plains in search of reptiles, insects, and small birds and mammals. Out on the plains, camouflage is essential for survival. Occasionally, a low flypast leads an impetuous victim to give away its position. Perched on a rocky outcrop, he waits for any sign of overconfidence. This small falcon weighs no more than 200 grams and possesses extraordinary eyesight. He can distinguish the smallest of movements, even of a grasshopper up to 100 meters away. Through their hunting, these small raptors help prevent infestations of insects and small mammals, and so they are highly beneficial for the environment.
So I love that film. I always wonder, does a grasshopper feel fear? Does it know that that falcon's coming? And again, to speaking to your communities and to your public or whoever you might reach, many won't think of a falcon as an insect eater. They'll think of them as rat eaters or mice eaters or some other small mammal eaters. And so there's just a lot to teach. In terms of insects and global decline, you can see that the group of grasshoppers has declined by nearly half. So it's matching some of those bird numbers where we're showing, that we've got so many species that have lost half of their populations in the last 30 years. So with grasshoppers in great decline, along with many other insects, you can see why it might be possible that then our species, the American kestrel, might also be losing its population numbers of populations. I think this is more extent happening in the east than the west right now. And certainly there have been other impacts that have been identified, such as climate change, loss of habitat, for example. But insects may be playing a role, given the number of grasshoppers and other insects that kestrels feed on. And also perhaps in a secondary way in terms of chemical use and the whole food chain concept, where if we're using chemicals and they impact grasshoppers and grasshoppers are being eaten by kestrels, then those chemicals are going up our food chain. So that's our kind of our downer information to provide to the public in the appropriate way and time. But then always what we want to do is we want to teach them, how can you help and what can you do to make things better for birds? And so we always offer solutions on any materials that we give, and we offer some very simple ones so that people feel like they can accomplish them. And these are just some of the few very simple things that can be presented at a Migratory Bird Day program or event, or can be used even as an activity, however you want to do that. Leaving the leaves down, probably, with our whole I don't know, our concept of lawns where we want them to be very clean. It's hard to get people to want to leave the leaf litter. But birds depend on it for shelter, for nutrients, especially during the overwintering time or in the winter months. So being able to leave those leaves on the ground is a big help to insect populations. And I think recommendations from gardening centers or insect groups say, to wait until the temperatures are at about 50 degrees before you remove that shelter for insects. And then, of course, planting native. And it's interesting how critical it is to provide the native plants that animals are used to or accustomed to or have evolved to use. It's been shown time and again that organisms that are using native plants are much more successful. Those are the plants where they do get their nutrients and where they have evolved to forage on more successfully. So planting native is an important aspect of insect and bird conservation. And then, of course, the chemical use, and this goes back to at the home, but it can also be taken at a larger level, a community level, as even to a state level. Some of our partners in Quebec had a very successful campaign where they've actually eliminated some of the chemicals that their city uses in order to protect birds and other organisms. So it is possible to work with your city or local leaders to lead efforts like that. I know that from talking with some of our insect-focused partners like Xerxes, you have to be careful that you don't replace one bad chemical with another bad one. So definitely it requires a lot of looking at what you're using and then getting some expert advice. But having a less manicured lawn, having some native habitat, and reducing that chemical use can be very critical to insects, and then, of course, back to migratory birds. And then we were fascinated to learn this year that light pollution doesn't only affect birds, it also affects insects. So birds with like city lights, traffic lights, street lights especially, they are attracted to those lights and often end up circling them. This can cause them to become exhausted. For birds, they can fall to the ground and then become vulnerable to predators or just basically use up their energy. They're migrating, so they need that energy. They don't need to waste it spinning around a light at any time of their life cycle. The same for insects. They tend to get trapped by light, caught in its glow, and then circle around it, also becoming exhausted and becoming more vulnerable. Excuse me. Becoming more vulnerable to predators. So dimming the lights, using dark sky approved lights at night is really helpful, or just really turning off your lights and feeling like that's okay not to have lights on all night. And then, as we all know, people have certain concepts about bugs, and this is a pretty one, so it's probably not at risk. But when you think about some of the other ones, especially maybe the larva, the pupa, and some of the other insects that aren't quite as attractive as a butterfly, people do have really negative visceral responses to them. So any way you can teach about insects and their benefits, and that they don't harm us, and leaving them to live and survive benefits other organisms like birds and our soil and so forth, is very helpful. So what can you do for an event? And then back to you, how can we help you to feel comfortable hosting a program or an event? One thing we think of is that, don't think of World Migratory Bird Day as like you've got to do a 3-day festival. In fact, we recommend if you're starting for the first time that you start really small. You host maybe one activity. It can be a bird walk. It can be associated with something else. But insects offer this really great new opportunity. And this year, if you're in the Southeast or other parts of the East, focusing on one of the cicada emergence really is a cool opportunity. So this is a once in a lifetime event, I believe, when cicadas will emerge, and they're expecting to see thousands of them. I've already noticed that the insect conservation community is already posting, please don't use chemicals, please don't try to kill these, let them do their thing. And of course, birds are going to benefit from this emergence as well. But there are other emergences around across the United States also. So wherever there's water, there are insect emergences. There's also, of course, the monarch butterfly and other butterfly migrations. If you're familiar with monarchs, you might know that monarchs aren't a preferred food for birds, or at least most birds. I think there are just a couple that might feed on them, and there are a couple species in Europe that feed on them. But they're actually noxious, or poor, they don't taste good to birds. And in some of the research programs, they found that some birds would actually throw up after eating a monarch butterfly. So they're a good example of an insect that birds don't like to eat. If you want to use them for that, that's great. Also, just offering an insect walk and talking about the birds that depend on them, having an insect scavenger hunt, or looking at some of the insects that your site really supports and helps. And we've had some fun ideas, like it's the Olympics this year, and the theme of the Olympics is higher, faster, stronger. And so having the bird and insect Olympics is one of the activities that we're going to be promoting. And then, of course, the practical solutions, offering native plants, demonstrating dark sky lighting, doing outdoor matching games or activities, and then just taking people on a bird walk and teaching about birds and their dependence on insects. So making sure it's not just a bird identification walk, but also a bird education walk. And so what do we have that you can use? Well, we try to provide you with everything. We try to make this as easy as possible. So these are just a few of our educational resources. They include conservation pins, stickers, banners for Facebook sites or any other sites, the poster, event flyers, icons for your social media, our educational brochure, which talks about, we managed to pack so much information into this. And again, our materials are in English and Spanish. So this brochure is actually printed in English on one side and Spanish on the other. So it's a great resource, and it has a little activity in it. And then, of course, ways to protect insects and birds. So we try to accomplish it all. And finally, you can find a lot of resources on our websites. So educational resources to download. We have PowerPoint presentations, coloring pages, all sorts of other activity ideas, crafts, anything you might want to do at a program or an event. And then our Trello board also has the same. So this is another place where you can go to find a number of materials. It's just a different format from our resource directory, but a lot of the materials are the same. Although here we have some images that you can use, photos, other graphics of our key species, our focal species for both insects and birds, press releases, announcements, and everything. And of course, we ask you to register your event. So the event map is always available and to put your information in. And this is how we track our success each year. We know it takes a little bit of time to do this, but we do really appreciate it. We're also launching an app this year. So for the first time, we're going to have a phone app where if people want to share some of their activities, they can put it on the app, and they can also put their own site location and other on a map on the app as well. So there are a couple options. We're building that out right now, and we'll be pulling from the global event map to build out the app. So we'll be sharing the links soon. But just having fun with people. Some of the really creative things have been costume parties, and there've been just wonderful costumes made of birds everywhere I've been, Chicago to Latin America, introducing new people to birds and bird watching and hosting activities outdoors, getting people outdoors is just critical. For a lot of the participants in World Migratory Bird Day, some of the most excitement that I see is that it's the first time they've met a biologist. That's big. It's the first time they've used binoculars. And it is probably the first time they've used a spotting scope if you have that activity. And parents get especially excited to have their child see a bird through their binoculars or through their spotting scope. Migratory Bird Day isn't really an event for the um, very experienced birder. We're trying to reach many different audiences. And so our concern isn't about whether or not they can identify every bird they see. We're trying to build that passion and love for birds that will take them to the next step and to wanting to help to protect them and conserve them. So that's our goal for the program. You can contact us. This is our information, and I'm sure you'll get a copy of this presentation and information in your email. But please, at any time, feel free to reach out. And I think as we move into, some open time here just to talk with you, I just want to ask if there, anything that we can do for you, anything that you see that we can provide for you that you would like to have, any questions you might have, we're here for you, and we just want to support your activities and programs. So again, many thanks for having me on today. It's a great pleasure, and I appreciate your all joining.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Susan. If anybody has questions, you can either type them in the meeting chat, or you can bring yourself off of mute to ask Susan about any questions that you have, either about World Migratory Bird Day or about anything that you might need assistance with your own celebration for it. So please ask away. Susan, you brought up some good pointers about just general backyard things you can do for not only the insects, but also for the birds. And just to, like, for my own instance, like, this is something that I have in my own backyard I'm taking very very seriously, especially trying to get my husband on board of leaving the leaves alone in the winter for the birds and the insects. So there's little things that if anybody doesn't think that they can do those little things, that you can. It takes some time to get everybody in your household on board with these kind of things.
Yeah, it can be challenging. In fact, for the first time, I actually hired someone to help with the yard because it kind of got out of control, but I didn't realize it. I almost cried, honestly. But they came in and just removed everything from the ground. And I was so upset. I just, but that's the way, even like if you have somebody working on their yard, the idea is to, quote unquote, clean it up. And that has this positive connotation to so many people that that's better. But it's not. So if you want to have a native, if you want to support wildlife, which a yard really can do, then you want to leave it as wild as possible.
Mm-hmm. So again, if anybody has any questions or comments, you can please come off of mute. Dawn says, "Thank you, Dr. Bonfield. Great connection between insects and birds. Let the garden sleep in." I like that.
I like that too. That's great.
Hey, Sue, Rich Fisher, question for you. So for installations that might be interested in launching out on a World Migratory Bird Day event, can you just kind of describe what that process might be for them to interact with you and perhaps to obtain some resources that would be useful for handing out on installations?
Sure. Yeah, you should just reach out to me, and then what I can do is, you know, work with you to figure out what you want to do and what your capacity is. One of the things I don't know about all of your installations is how you operate a program like this in terms of allowing people on site, or where you do your programming. But regardless of where you do it, we have the materials and the support to help you accomplish that. So I'm always happy to talk with anybody about putting together a program, about what kind of materials might be best suited. And there are a lot of other materials I didn't even show. We have fun things like Bird Buddy bracelets and, lots of other education materials. So just because one theme is used in a prior year, we still keep a lot of those materials because they're so useful. So for example, we still have materials on our water theme from last year, on our plastics pollution theme. So even if you decide, maybe I want to do insects, but I also want to do a plastic pollution cleanup, or I want to do something about light pollution on my installation. I mean, that would be great. We are happy to, provide you with the dim the lights for birds at night information. So you don't have to consider you have to do this theme or you can't do Migratory Bird Day. You can choose whatever works for you. We just try to make it easy for you.
Hey, thanks. So for those on the line, there are a couple of options to getting to Sue. One, you can certainly come to me and I can put you in touch with Sue. DoD Partners in Flight also has an outreach working group. Bob Shawman from Naval Weapons Station Seal Beach is our chair of that working group. Bob had a conflict this morning out west, so couldn't be on. But Bob is a great resource for outreach events. So I encourage you, if you're interested on your installation, to have any kind of event, to reach out to us, and we'd be glad to assist on that.
Great.
We have a question from Amanda. Do you work with master gardeners to spread the word?
Not as much as we should have. We've tended to leave that to the local groups to reach out to their master gardeners. So for example, we do it here. We have our own event, and Harlequin Gardens and Master Gardeners in Boulder County will be participating in our Migratory Bird Day event. But no, that's a good idea. I don't know if there's an actual like national network. I guess that's something I've never known, or if that's more of a local effort.
That's a good question, Amanda. And I know it also depends on your local gardening centers. The ones that are around me are very much pushing towards building better habitats in our backyards around here and making sure that there are a good selection of native plant species, so you can plant native plant species in your yard along with non-native species for the birds and the insects. So I think it kind of it depends, but I think that's a really good question to ask. Mike has a question for you, Rich. Is there a potential to work with families of service members on installations or groups such as Blue Star families?
I mean, absolutely. I think any opportunities to do some outreach to the family members of our service members is great. I'm not familiar with the Blue Star program. We used to have some programs or a program where we partnered with, I think it was the Sierra Club, and we handed out fishing rods. That program is no longer, but we certainly always encourage installations to have some type of event where they can provide some outreach to the families of our service members. So Bob is probably better suited to answer that question than I am. But Mike, please catch me offline, and I'd be glad to put you in touch with Bob.
He continued that with, is there a contract or contracts that could help us with these connections? I'm sure that you were saying Bob will work on connecting with Bob will work on that. For those of you who are attending, Susan just put her email address in the chat. So if you have any additional questions or would like to reach out to her for some of these materials, please grab that email address in the chat box, please.
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd look forward to talking to you. And like I said, we have interns on the around at a number of installations from Texas to Minnesota, as well as in California. So if we can get a chance to meet you, we'd love to.
Susan, I was going to ask, do you have any examples of any migratory bird day celebrations in the past that were wildly successful that you were not expecting them to be as successful as they were? Just even if it's if you knew of like one specific installation or event like that your team was very excited to hear about how many attendees were happened to be there on that day.
We don't always get that kind of information unless they answer some of our surveys that we send out. And I'm not sure if I've had an installation answer those surveys. We send them out about every 2 years. The funny thing is that a lot of the events that you see today anywhere even if they're not called Migratory Bird Day, they were started as Migratory Bird Day. So, for example, the biggest week in America was International Migratory Bird Day for years and years and years. And then they took it and exploded it to this week-long festival. That's not on a military installation, but just as an example. Now, we've worked with various installations at different locations, and the only and this is back to you, I guess, Jerry, is the only thing we've heard is that at some of the installations where we've worked, they just have some limitations as to how many people they're going to let in. So, in that way, I don't know what the numbers are at those events.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how much they get promoted outside of the bases to the general public, or if they are mostly military installation focused events with, say, families of that base.
Mm-hmm.
Which is great as well, because you think about it. I mean, some of the bases are huge with huge communities that, are working on them.
Yeah, I know. I know in the past, we've talked about other events that happen, and so I just was wondering if you happened, because sometimes it sounds like these, especially with the military families, they are very interested in getting out and meeting the other people that work on the bases besides the active service members. So it always seems like those events seem to be always well attended by the families of the service people. So
Right.
I just was just wondering if you had any solid numbers or not. So
no, not for installations. I don't. I wish I did, and maybe this is with this connection this year, maybe that we can get that started. I do know, like what you just said, from talking with some of our staff who are working on bases now, and I guess from them. So we're hiring actually military veterans and spouses and dependents to work on the bases for the Monarch Butterfly Project. But they're also helping us glean information like this. And so what I've learned is that your families are really close, and they depend on each other a lot when they're on base and even in the community. So any kind of community-based activity, whether it's a conservation action or any kind of gathering, is really well received. So I loved learning more about that and how the families work together and depend on each other. So I can see how that would be that it would be well attended by families.
we have about 5 more minutes. If anybody has any additional questions or comments, you can come forward. If not, do you have anything else you would like to say about Environment for the Americas or World Migratory Bird Day? Or Rich, do you have any additional comments for the group?
I actually was just texting with someone who may put another question in, but in case that doesn't happen, Sue, thanks a lot for. Oh, okay, he said go ahead. So we have a somebody who's asking whether or not a migratory bird booth would be appropriate at Earth Day, and so my thought is absolutely anything that we do to promote migratory birds during any event is a positive thing. Sue, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I can go back to that. That's a good point. Yes, definitely we see a lot of Migratory Bird Day activities at Earth Day and at other events. The Caribbean region uses it during their endemic bird day, the birds that don't leave and don't migrate. So they use the theme, but that's great. We want to get the word out about insects that are important to endemic birds also. In terms of ways to do programming, a lot of what I've noticed, and this is with DoD as well, I've noticed that there are often partnerships in programming. So whether it's an Earth Day or a Migratory Bird Day activity, teaming up with local agencies like U.S. Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, whatever agencies are in your area, or other organizations, a lot of groups do that as well. So it's a big help. Much appreciated.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sue.
We do. Oh, sorry, Rich. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jerry.
I was going to say, Tad McCall, if you have a question or a comment, you can bring yourself off of mute and ask Susan or Rich.
I just wanted to thank her. Great presentation. Thanks. Bye.
Oh, thanks for coming. I appreciate that. And your some of your locations are also in what's called bird cities. So a new program, which is Bird City, encourages cities to do actions to protect birds. And these are in 4 categories. But one of them that's required is to host Migratory Bird Day. So any installations, and it's in a number of states. So it's in Colorado, it's in Pennsylvania, I'm trying to think, Minnesota, Florida, there's just a bunch of bird cities. Texas is huge. So Texas bird cities has grown dramatically. So your base might actually be in the vicinity or in a bird city area. And that's a good thing to hook up with as well. And I could, any connections you want me to look up for you, I'm happy to do that. Like which bases are in bird cities, or, something like that. And thanks, Jess.
Well, thanks, Sue, for raising lots of issues associated with migratory birds and for giving us details on your program with Environment for the Americas and World Migratory Bird Day. This is all extremely relevant for DoD. We understand that migratory birds as a whole have undergone a long-term decline, and that's relevant to DoD because we not only undertake conservation programs to protect the mission, but we have so many species moving in the wrong direction and moving towards federal listing. Those federal listings impact our mission. So the more we can do proactively to conserve migratory birds, the better we're protecting the mission. And DoD Partners in Flight and the overall bird conservation program, which includes all of you on installations, feel free to reach out to me at any time to connect with Sue or any others who are working in migratory birds. Partners in Flight is here to serve you all, and we're happy to help with any type of migratory bird issue. So again, Sue, thank you so much for your time and all the great information.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Sue. Your presentation was wonderful, and the artwork on those posters was just beautiful.
This isn't it?
Yes, so thank you.
Agreed.
Everybody, please reach out to Sue. Like she said, she's more than happy to help you plan your next World Migratory Bird Day event. Lots of good resources on on the Environment of America's website. So please get in contact with her. And thank you so much, Sue, for doing your presentation again. And with that, we'll end today's presentation. So thank you everyone for joining. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.